Welcome to Journey Through Reality. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Bradford Long. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm putting my hair up. Hold on.
You're all good. You're all good.
All right. Hi. How's it going?
Yeah, good, good. Yeah, I wanted well, I've been wanting to speak to Stephen for a long time. We did a live stream way back when with Ishmael,
Hmm?
and kind of since then we've been trying to make this work, but um, various reasons we've had to reschedule. So I'm very grateful that you're here, Stephen. Thank you very much. I
Of course.
wanted to speak with you because not only do you have, I guess, a lot of experience in various religious traditions, you've kind of been all over the shop, as it were, but also uh, just as a gay man, you probably have first-hand experience of what it's like to exist in religious spaces as a member of the LGBT community. And so I kind of just wanted to explore with you um, that topic and kind of religion's, I guess, complicated relationship with sexuality and homosexuality in particular, and all this kind of stuff. Because it's an interesting topic, but it's also something I find is potentially one of the most contentious things that's going on in the religious world at the moment. And in my i- like where the spaces I'm existing in now are probably generally affirming, but I haven't always existed in those spaces. And looking out kind of like at the broader religious world, it seems like institutions like the Catholic Church might feel like they want to have the conversation, but the church isn't really ready for the conversation. They don't want to like blow everything up. And so I think it's nonetheless an important conversation to have, whatever kind of side someone lands on, whether they're kind of more progressive or conservative or whatever else. I think it's a conversation worth having. And so
Yes, totally. Yeah.
maybe we'll just start. Do you mind just kind of like introducing who you are, for those who, maybe anyone who's watching this later who doesn't know who you are, and kind of talking a little bit about your kind of religious journey over the years, because you've had quite the journey. So
I've had I've had quite the wild journey. Yeah, so I funnily enough, my writing online started and I really cut my teeth as a writer of working on this subject, right? And by the way, my phone is on a little stand here and it's super wobbly.
it's fine.
So every little move that I make on my desk, I'll give all the audience seasickness. Um, no, so back in 2013, I was in my 20s, um, early slash mid 20s, and I was really struggling with with my faith and with my sexuality, and I started writing about it, and that was when I uh, came up with the title for my then blog, Sacred Tension. And because Sacred Tension was and that's the title of my current Substack, that was the title of my podcast for years, and so that theme has really followed me through the course of my work. Of here are two irreconcilable seeming things, right? Two things that I did not choose. I did not choose my faith, and I did not choose and that sounds strange to say that I did not choose my faith, but I really didn't. It was part of me. And then here's this other thing I did not choose, which was my sexuality. And they were at odds with each other. And sacred tension existing in that kind of horrific suspension between the two. And um so my work has largely moved on from LGBT topics. But I'm of course always happy to talk about it. I'm always happy to be, called back into the rank to discuss this. Now most of my work focuses on mental health, on men's issues, on spirituality, on all kinds of stuff. But I'm always happy to return to this topic. So I was raised in an extremely religious household. I won't say anyone's names because my family did not consent to be talked about online by their, degenerate black sheep son. But um, my father runs an international ministry, and he is very well known. And you wouldn't know him. People on the street wouldn't know him, but he is very influential within his sphere. And then my mom was a pastor for my entire life, pastored a local church. My sisters have both been involved in ministry to some degree or other. I was involved in ministry. I was a missionary, um, and also very seriously considered becoming a pastor. And so I was raised in a kind of charismatic setting in which the supernatural was very real. These weren't, like, I say this with all love and respect, like Episcopalians who just have the most tenuous belief in God possible. They're like, maybe he's real, maybe he's not. We don't know. We're going to drink sherry and play bridge together, right? And this wasn't that. This wasn't that. This was full blazing certainty. And so I grew up in a setting where people were speaking in tongues, where exorcisms were happening, where there was this nonstop spiritual war going on in the world. And we were individual players in that war. And part of that war was homosexuality. And, I looking back, it was really quite destructive because I was secretly coming to understand that I'm gay as a teenager, as a 14, 15, 16, 17-year old. And to be raised and to be raised in an ultra Christian family, going to a Christian high school, ensconced in basically my father's subculture, right? And his international subculture. And a big piece of that subculture was ideological war. At that time, particularly over homosexuality and gay men and women being allowed into the church or allowed in ministry. My family was part of the Peace USA, which is the Presbyterian Church of the United States of America, the kind of flagship Presbyterian church in the US. And one of the big battles back then was over gay people. And so there was a war being waged over me unknowingly within my own household. And looking back on that, and I love my family. I forgive my family. They were doing the best that they could with what they were given. I'm very close with my family, actually. I'm very close with my dad now. But it was extraordinarily destructive. And it I can say so much more, but that I'll leave it there. I will say, in 2017, in my late 20s, early 30s, I think I was like 29, 28, 29. I left Christianity and I converted straight to the Satanic Temple. Big turn. And I deconstructed Christianity in public, in my writing and on my podcast. And then at the end of 2017, I discovered the Satanic Temple, and I just went straight to the Satanic Temple. And I was in TST, the Satanic Temple, for 6 years. And then I rose in the ranks, and I became a minister, and I became a leader there. And And then I left leadership at the end of 2023, December of 2023, and then I left Satanism completely at the beginning of 2024. And there are all kinds of influences in there. You know, I'm heavily influenced by Western Buddhism. I'm heavily influenced by the occult from my time in TST. I'm heavily influenced by Christianity, and I think some could argue that I am in fact a Christian, though I let other people argue over that, and I don't really engage in those fights. So it's a wild religious path. It's been a wild religious journey, and that is a whole other conversation that we can have of whatever the fuck it is that I am.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's helpful. And
Yeah.
I think maybe kind of following on from what you said, then, like when you um, were coming to terms with your sexuality, and at the same time seeing that as being in contradistinction to your faith, in which you were raised and in which you were participating. Um, what was that? What was that experience like for you, just on a kind of subjective level? Because that's it's not necessarily something I had to go through. I was also raised Christian, and I had my own struggles with Christianity. And when I was like 13 or whatever, I came out to my parents as an atheist. So I had some of those kind of maybe parallel conversations with them that were quite difficult,
Mm.
but kind of nowadays they're pretty neutral towards the whole sexuality question. Like me, my brother, and my sister are all bisexual, and then my youngest sister's gay. So like we've kind of all ended up on the spectrum. And so you know, having that as being like a primary thing kind of in your mind and in your heart. Yeah, do you mind speaking a bit about like what that was like for you?
Yeah. And to clarify, I got distracted by Ishmael in the chat. Our dear friend Ish. He says, "Hey lads." So just to make sure I caught the beginning of that question, you're asking, what was it like in a first person subjective sense to realize I'm gay in that kind of setting?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to put myself back in that headspace. And I was actually trying to before our conversation because I knew that this question was coming. And um it was extraordinarily scary and extraordinarily painful because the the taboo against homosexuality. Ish says, "Sorry lads." No, we love you, Ish. The taboo against homosexuality was so profound, and it wasn't it wasn't like having a disease, right? It wasn't like discovering as a kid that I have leukemia or something, or diabetes. It was like discovering a Lovecraftian cosmic horror existing inside of me, because in that worldview there is an order to the world, there is an order to creation, and the cosmos functions when its DNA is aligned and not mutated. And so God has a plan, according to that view. God has a plan for reality. And if we deviate from it, then we are monstrous aberrations that are threaten and it threatens the order of civilization. It threatens the order of the cosmos, right? And so if we deviate from what God laid out in the Garden of Eden, and if we deviate from his plans, then what that's actually doing is like injecting alien DNA into the genome of the universe, right? And so it was like a cosmic horror, and all of this was happening intuitively for me. It wasn't necessarily happening consciously, but that's how deep these religious beliefs go, and I kept it secret for many years. I slowly started to tell friends when maybe I was 15 and 16, and it was hellacious. I mean, it was very, very scary, and especially to be in a setting where I knew that there would be dire consequences to people knowing. And so it was very scary, and it was very isolating, and it was a really terrible thing for any young person to go through. Um, another important wrinkle is that knew what ex gay was before I knew what gay was. And by ex gay, I mean, so back then, this was in the early 2000s. The ex gay movement was just in full swing, and it had not really started to collapse until over a decade later, right? And ex gay is the Christian response to the gay movement, and ex gay is Christian conversion therapy, basically, but through prayer and through social support. It can be the same sex attractions can be remediated, lessened, or reversed, right? And healed, right? And because of my father's work and because of the community I was in, I knew what ex gay was before I knew what gay was. And so ex gay was the immediate framework that I had to understand what was going on with me, which was I uh it was an eroticized wound, meaning I have a deep wound according to ex-gay, I have a deep wound in terms of how I relate to the same sex somehow. So maybe it comes from my parents, maybe it comes from my peers, and then I hit puberty, and that wound became eroticized, and there were a lot of um, really dangerous messages that came with that, like we people are gay because they were sexually abused, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to go spelunking into my past to see if there is any hint that I was abused as a kid. I wasn't. um Maybe it's because of my parents. Okay, I'm going to go spelunking into my past to see it, like, where's the root of that. Maybe my parents caused that. Yeah, and so it caused a lot of maladaptive rumination. And but there were some other very toxic messages that came along with it. I remember reading somewhere in some ex-gay literature, gay people are incapable of genuine love, and gay being gay is ultimately like a form of sexual cannibalism, where it's like devouring the thing that you need, that you feel an insufficiency of. And gay people die at, the message was gay people die at the age of 40. There was this stat going around. So much fear mongering and so much terror and so much misinformation, and it really, looking back, it really set me back, right? And I don't just mean emotionally, but I mean developmentally, right? Like, it, because so much of my life was consumed with this from the ages of 13 to 25. It A lot of important things passed me by because I was so mired I was so mired in the uh, battle, the internal battle over being gay and Christian, and the inherent self-loathing that comes with that. I was so mired in that a lot of important experiences just passed me by, and I really didn't start living, I feel like, until my 20s, maybe my mid 20s.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how difficult that was. And you were talking about the ex-gay movement and everything like that, and as you were speaking, the question that came to me, it's like, well, what are the options presented to you? Because, in some Christian communities nowadays, they've kind of um, disavowed conversion therapy as something that's maybe outdated or pseudoscientific or um, was never really based in reality or whatever. Um, and so their kind of like pastoral solution is either enforced celibacy, um, or I heard one priest say, like, basically you marry like an understanding woman, essentially. Um, all of which are just like insane to me. But conversion therapy of those options seems like by far the most destructive, because it takes this idea that you're kind of like, the Catholic Church uses the language of intrinsically disordered, and it kind of takes that and psychologically instills it in you through the process of this kind of um, yeah, pseudoscientific kind of therapy, and it doesn't work. And there's been lots of kind of scandals that have come out um, kind of since then about the conversion therapy movement
Oh
and,
yeah,
and that kind of
oh yeah.
stuff.
The latest of which, by the way, is that I don't mean to interject, but the latest of which is that Alan Chambers, who is the president of Exodus International, was recently caught in a sting. Um, he was caught in a sting. This was just a few weeks ago, trying to meet up with a minor,
Wow.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
that is the latest. And he was also the one who shut down Exodus International, to his credit. But there are a number of situations like that in the gay world, or in the ex-gay world, I should say,
Mhm.
of people living duplicitous lives. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess if you pathologize and you repress your sexuality, it can come out in all sorts of kind of harmful ways. But mm, like when you kind of started to realize that you were gay, and you had this understanding of what's essentially conversion therapy, was that ever the solution that was proposed to you? Is that something that was ever enforced on you?
Conversion therapy was the only solution. It was the
Yeah.
default solution for me. And so I remember going through deliverance ministry. So deliverance ministry is like the Protestant, I guess. It's like exorcism light, right? And so in the framework that I grew up in, exorcism is for people who um exorcism is for people who are fully possessed, where it's like, the demon has just fully fucking colonized your every part of your personality. And that's exorcism movie shit. You can see my exorcism poster right there
Yeah.
on my wall. Um but deliverance ministry is when someone is oppressed
Okay.
by a demon, and it has taken up it's like a squatter, in your basement or something, psychic basement. And I went through deliverance ministry. I had demons cast out of me multiple times for this, and for homosexuality, and getting rid of those demons of homosexuality. And so for me, the default understanding conversion therapy or Christian conversion ministry was the default. There was no other option. And celibacy as an option, what we call side B, right? And the gay Christian fight kerfuffle over this. So going back to, or going to the lingo here in the gay Christian world, side A are people who believe that represents the belief that homosexuality is morally comparable to heterosexuality, and that marriage between gay people is equally blessed, or is comparable to straight people being married, and the same requirements are the same ethical requirements apply. I'm being distracted by the chat here. We'll get to the chat here in a bit. I'm very ADHD. Keep chatting though. Keep telling us your thoughts, people. We love it. Side B is the belief that celibacy is required, that homosexuality is not within God's vision for humanity. However, where I think side B is more radical, honestly, it was very radical for me back in the day. And side B did not come into my life until maybe like I was in college, till my early 20s. Was this idea of, you can't change this. This isn't going to change, but you can't act on it. Right. And this is much more aligned with the Catholic view, which is, yes, you can't change. Yes, it is intrinsically disordered, to use the language of the Catholic Catechism. And really the solution is either celibacy or some kind of relationship with a woman. And yeah, that's right. Consciousism says, while celibacy is mandated for Catholic priests, it is not universal to Christianity. Absolutely. And so the option of celibacy did not appear for me until years later. Side X, which is what it was called in those, gay Christian settings of people trying to figure this shit out. Side X, meaning gay conversion therapy or ex-gay, that was the default for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I guess my next question is kind of like, why do you think this has become such an ideological touch point in a lot of Christianity, especially in some Protestant circles, I would say? Because, when I was growing up, I grew up Orthodox and everything, and kind of it was on my radar a little bit, but like it was not. It was not a big thing. This wasn't a thing that was like really spoken about, and people who were gay and everything either quietly had kind of relationships outside of the church's kind of blessing, or they kind of just like stayed celibate essentially. It wasn't really conversion therapy, and this whole like idea that this is caught up in this whole spiritual battle wasn't something that was really emphasized or spoken about, at least not by the majority, at least. So why is it? I mean, obviously there are some verses in the Bible that allude to some sort of condemnation of some sexual behavior that may or may not be interpreted as homosexuality. But other than that, like, what is it about, I guess, these forms of Protestant Christianity that has created such vitriol towards kind of homosexuality and the LGBT community more broadly?
I mean, that's the question. So I mean, there are so many directions to go in here. Let's take the biblical arguments first. Okay. So I think one reason why this is such a challenging subject is because the historic track record of Christendom's views are pretty consistent, right? And that consistency does not, I believe, does not come from it doesn't come from the five or so verses. You have Leviticus, you have Paul's various statements, Romans 1. I think the most consistent, or the biggest argument, one of the biggest passages is Roman 1. But the hold on, my cat is banging on the door. It isn't a stream unless a cat appears. Come on.
Bring the cat.
Behold.
Hello, kitty.
This is Eli.
Hello, Eli.
He is one of 6. He's our big boy.
Oh, he is a big boy.
Hi. He always has to be in the office with me when I'm getting work done. Yeah. Okay, I'll put you down. I'm sorry. So the historic view of homosexuality within the church is, I would say, consistently negative. Now, there's variation within that, right? There's variation within that negativity. I don't accept the work of people like John Boswell, who
Who's that? Sorry, I've never heard of John
Okay,
Boswell.
so John Boswell was a gay historian and theologian, Catholic, who wrote Gay Unions in Pre-Modern Europe or something. And it was a big book,
Okay.
but really what he argued was that he is that in pre-modern Europe, in the Christian world, the same-sex unions were more accepted, and he draws from the Adelphopoiesis rites of Eastern Orthodoxy, which were brother rights, and I think they're really beautiful, and I've written about those on my Substack, but they were not homosexual unions, right? They were not. But and I really reject that framing. I think that is incorrect. I think John Boswell was wrong, despite how desperately he wanted to see some kind of tradition within early Christianity of accepting homosexuality. I just don't think it's there. And one of the reasons it isn't there is not because of the 5 clobber passages, as they're called, 5 to 6, 5 to 7 clobber passages. You have the arsenokoitai passages in the New Testament from Paul, where he uses the word arsenokoitai, which is a very ambiguous word that people have been fighting about, and it's translated today as homosexuals, but he kind of made it up. It doesn't appear in Greek prior to his usage of it, and all that kind of shit, right? And but it isn't because of that. It is because of the vision of creation that is overarching through the scripture from the book of Genesis all the way through. And it is that vision is heterosexual. And that vision is one of where human marriage is integral to understanding the relationship between church and God. Right? The church is the bridegroom of of God the Father, of Christ, I should say. And so now, additionally, though, and this is something that's always important to to point out, there are no major councils that there have been no major councils through Christian history that have stated that, to my knowledge, that marriage is between one man and one woman, etc. Right, and so this is not a primary doctrinal issue. It is a secondary doctrinal issue. It is tertiary, um, and so there are no major creeds, there are no councils that have declared this. But I'm my hot take is that I believe that that the better arguments within the Bible, taking the full sweep of the Bible, I think that the better arguments are against homosexuality than for it. If you take the Bible, just the Bible, right? I also believe that the pro-slavery theologians during the Civil War in the United States had the better arguments, had the better biblical arguments, right? And in the same way, slavery was seen as kind of a central image to slavery was seen as like a central image to the relationship between God and man. Okay, so I happen to think that the better biblical arguments are on the side of the anti-gay people, right?
Mm.
Um, I think they're wrong, obviously, but so there's that. There's that, and this is and heterosexuality is the standard for has been seen as God's plan for humanity through Christian history, right? There's that. But that doesn't really answer your question, which is why is there so much vitriol? And this is I'm going to actually cover the comments here because I'm getting so distracted. I will return to them here in a minute. Okay, there we go. Why is there so much vitriol? You know, I think we really underestimate in 2026 just how taboo homosexuality has been in Western history for the past 1,000 years or so. And I think it has to do, I think it has a lot to, and a lot of the vitriol focuses specifically on male homosexuality, right?
Yeah.
It isn't, you don't hear as much rage over female homosexuality.
Which is interesting as well because, the verses in the Bible seem to, at least prima facie, only speak about
That's right.
male
Right.
relationships.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
they don't even mention.
There's only one passage that does. There's only one passage that alludes to female homosexuality, and that is Romans 1, where
Mm.
for the first, and this is the first time in all of Scripture, literally, this is the first time in the entire canon where where it it acknowledges the existence of lesbians, and which which I think is kind of hilarious. You know, there's no mention of female homosexuality in the Old Testament. There's no mention of it until you get to Romans 1, and then it isn't mentioned after that. So there's literally one mention of it. So this is deeply bound up in male sexuality.
Mm.
There's something there about that. And it might be the disgust at men acting like women. And so there might be some misogyny. There might be some rooted anti-femaleness there, that it is fundamentally grotesque and inhuman for men to have sex with other men because that's acting like a woman. It might have to do with deeply held notions of what it means to be a man. And I see this taboo as similar against homosexuality as similar to anti-Semitism in a way. It's an ancient hatred that is almost primordial, and it's very hard to explain. It's very hard to describe, and it might be that. And here's another controversial take. And this is not a comparison to anti-Semitism. This is just taking homosexuality on its own, all else being equal. There might be an innate level of homophobia within, especially men, that every generation will have to overcome. That might be the case, and it might be something that is deeply primordial in the human mind for whatever reason, and it might be something that has to be overcome. And I really think that we do not appreciate the depths of this taboo and how recent it is for this to be okay. Like how in the United States we got gay marriage in 2015 at the
it was
federal level.
2013 in the UK, so
Yeah,
it wasn't a long time ago.
2015, just over a decade. I mean, and a lot of us didn't think that it would happen in our lifetime back then. It was. So we really take for granted the moment that we're living in and how good it is for gay people and how quickly that can change. And we take for granted the depths of taboo. Even like back in the early 2000s, like it was a different world that I was living in. And so I think it has to do with misogyny. I think it has to do with something to do with masculinity. I think it has to do with the fear of the fear of human animals. So here's another important part, which is David Livingston Smith, brilliant scholar. I've interviewed him twice on my old podcast. He works on dehumanization, and he wrote a book called Making Monsters, and he studies genocides and bigotry and lynchings and all of that stuff. And one of the things that he says is that appears all the time in this appears all the time in bigotry and dehumanization. Hold on, I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb here real fast. Okay. What appears over and over and over again in the history of bigotry and dehumanization is the conflation of human and animal. Okay. Gay people get this all the time. Because of our sexual activity, we're called animals. We're called beasts. We because of the ways male homosexuality naturally falls outside of the norms of heterosexuality. You marry one person, you have sex, you have missionary sex with that person for 50 years or whatever, right? By default, gay people fall outside of that, and that makes us animals. Not just animals, human animals. So whenever people say whenever people start conflating human and animal, and they say they don't just call you animals, They call you human animals.
Mm.
There's this bestiality of the merging of human and inhuman, and that is when dangerous things happen to minorities.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. It's really interesting because it sounds like, as you say, like there's something specific about the male expression of homosexuality that makes men, who obviously have historically been the kind of ruling class throughout the history of the West, that makes men so uncomfortable. And kind of contrary to that, there's almost this fetishization of the female expression of homosexuality. So, you're talking about this kind of like innate homophobia that every generation might have to overcome. Like, what is it about obviously you speak about masculinity a lot, so like what is it about our conception of masculinity that's so threatened by male expressions of homosexuality?
Yeah, so my favorite, and I have no idea if this is true or not. Evo psych, evolutionary psychology is very dubious, right? I think that there are insights there, and it's often just so stories, trying to make sense of our human condition or cultural things or whatever, acknowledging all of that, right?
Mhm.
I think the most fucking hilarious theory, evo psych theory, is that there is an innate level of homophobia in men, because if there wasn't, men are so horny they would just be fucking each other and the human race would go extinct. So fucking funny to
That's
me.
great.
Yeah, and I don't know. It is, all I can say is that I feel it. I have felt the homophobia. I have experienced the homophobia. I have felt the homophobia as a man, and really felt it in high school and college and in my 20s, and but I was the target of it, that internalized homophobia, and it happened really naturally. And it here's the other thing. It might just always be that homosexuality is an other, right? And it's always hard to be a minority.
Mm,
If someone is outside the norm, I don't know if there will ever be a time when that's easy fully, right?
yeah,
I think that there's something in human psychology. Yeah, it might really just be this simple. I think that there's something in human psychology to always be suspicious of the outsider. I
yeah,
think that is deeply embedded, and fortunately, as civilization has progressed, as luminaries like John Stuart Mill and so on have injected new ideas into society, the we are able to expand our circle of empathy. Right. I forget which philosopher it was who talked about the expanding circle of empathy. But I think that is quite unnatural to us as a species.
mm,
Um, and we have to work on it, right? I think we have to actively work to practice empathy for people who aren't like us. And so it might be that minorities will always be vulnerable because human nature might simply arise, and the default might be to be suspicious of the stranger,
yeah,
and that might just always be the case. And yeah, I think that might just always be the case.
yeah. That's difficult for me. Like I kind of don't want to believe that would be the the case, because it just seems so I don't know,
It's dark.
pessimistic, I guess.
It's dark. It's dark.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's really important is that mysticism that is expansive and humanizing and is about, the union of all conscious creatures. That's human nature too.
Yeah.
So what I'm not saying is that our deepest, truest nature is bigotry. That's not what I'm saying. Instead, what I'm saying is that there are these countervailing instincts within humanity,
Mm.
within the human psyche. They are all there. And, human beings contain heaven and hell. We contain all of it. It's all in our nature. And so I'm not saying that bigotry is our default state, our deepest, truest state. And instead, I'm saying, it's a war, it's a battle over which instinct wins.
Mm. Yeah, and I think maybe because what I kind of observe about the LGBT kind of civil rights movement, not only when it comes to the kind of like sexuality and rights, but also like trans rights, is that the way that the discussion is framed will often be relative to like what the or kind of like how these things get expressed are like relative to how the conversation is framed. So, for example, like a big thing in the like early gay rights movement was this idea that sexuality is kind of well, the way it was presented was it's almost like immutable and like essential to
Yes.
someone's
Yeah. Yeah.
nature as a
And,
human
and,
being.
and that was an innovation of the 1800s, right? I
Sure.
forget
Yeah,
I
that's
forget
how we
this.
get this idea
Yes.
of like sexuality as like identity,
Yes.
um, which someone was saying in the chat earlier was something that's very foreign to the kind of pre-modern mindset,
That's
right?
right. Didn't exist.
And I wonder if actually, and I don't know what you think about this, moving away, the kind of asserting that in full force was maybe helpful for the those particular times in which those conversations arose. Um, But I wonder if moving away from kind of speak of like essence and stuff like that would and maybe more towards kind of like fluid sexuality and gender, and kind of like a greater fluidity and a greater sense of like the spectrum and things like that, rather than these really stringent labels that we tend to apply to each other. Because I kind of think if every man realized that he's probably just like a tiny bit gay if he drinks enough. Like I feel like that that would probably go some distance in trying to like break down these barriers. And you know, as kind of heteronormativity uh, breaks breaks apart, I think we might have the groundwork for a different conception of um, how we relate to sexuality moving forwards. But I think the big challenge for that, especially within the religious realm, kind of returning to the theme of the conversation, is that Christianity has traditionally been this very uh, realist tradition, in the sense, like it's taken kind of Aristotelian categories of like substance and stuff like that, um, and has adopted those. And so I think I'm hearing a lot.
So sorry. I just put on. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was trying to put my charging thing on the back of my phone, but it fucked it up apparently. All right, keep talking. Keep talking.
You're fine, all right. So yeah, I think it's particularly difficult in tradition because this vision of sexuality in terms of kind of positing is like maybe fundamentally opposed to how Christianity has traditionally conceived of this.
There's still an echo. Can you, Ben, say something really fast?
Hello.
Is there still an echo?
I'm still hearing.
Are you still hearing the echo?
Yeah.
Let me turn down the volume here. Okay, now talk.
Hello.
Is that better?
It's much quieter.
Okay. Let me mute.
Hello.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to mute and then say something really fast.
Hello. Oh, yeah, I can't hear the echo now. Well, I'll just finish what I was saying and then hand over to you. So basically, this vision of sexuality that I'm kind of postulating seems fundamentally opposed to the kind of like realist and essentialist vision that Christianity has traditionally had of sexuality and gender and sex and marriage and this kind of stuff. And so, do you have any suggestions of ways forward that we can kind of further the dialogue between the kind of LGBT community and Christian institutions?
Sure. Okay, first, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I mean, that's such a big question that I was actually here taking notes on my thoughts on this. So, just yesterday, this is really funny. Just yesterday, a guy came to me and told me, he's like, I identify as straight. I've only ever had sex with women, but I keep having these experiences or these thoughts that really undermine that, and it's causing him a lot of distress. And he's like, I'm primarily attracted to women. I'm super attracted to women, but there's like this thing that keeps coming up for me. This attraction to men. The number of times I hear that from straight guys would fucking blow your mind. All right. It is so, and I mean, I hear it all the time. The number of men, and I would say it's still a minority, right? But it's a sizable minority. It is way more people in my life than you would expect, right? They come, they feel safe enough and secure enough to come to me to talk about this. And it's just gotten to the point now where a straight guy will when a straight guy really cautiously and kind of bashfully approaches me and he's like, hey, Stephen, can I really talk to you? Can I talk to you about something? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm here. Yeah. Tell me. I'm ready. The number of times that literally just happened yesterday. So there is a lot of variation in human desire, and sexuality is fucking feral, and it does not obey our civilizational rules. Doesn't care. It is truly, and I say this in a good way, truly animal, and it does not care about our societal norms. And our kinks, our fantasies, our desires, that is a wilderness that no matter how much we try to impose society, our rules upon it, it doesn't care. So the other thing worth pointing out here is that we tend to frame sexuality as pair bonding between two adults, two individuals, in a marital or romantic setting. That is not the whole of human sexuality. And so there are a huge number of guys, huge number of men who really only want to love a woman, but they love having sex with men. Or, to be crass about it, they love jerking off with guys. And it feels intimate and brotherly and as a form of friendship, but it is not the face-to-face kind of eros love. The number of guys I have seen or who have told me that they are into that is astronomical, right? So there are many ways that people use the language of sex of sexuality and sexual pleasure. There are many ways that people use that language to connect with each other, and it is not always romantic. And that naturally arises for a lot of people. And so there are, like, geez, I mean, any gay man will tell you this, all right? Any gay man who has been on Grindr at 3 a.m. will tell you this, that so many of those guys are straight guys and they are looking to explore themselves, or they have this other part of themselves that they are trying and sometimes you'll ask these guys, like, and I've asked these men, like, what's the magnet that's drawing you to this? And he says, I just want to feel close to a male friend. That is so far outside of the conception that we have of modern sexuality, that it exists within a romantic, amorous context. But it's very real, right? This sexuality is fucking feral, and it does not care about our rules. So when you're saying that the boundaries are blurry, yes, 100%. Now, the way that I like to describe this, and when people get all tied up in knots about the identity part of this, and I think identity is often a tangle that people get caught up in a lot, and it causes them a lot of distress in a lot of ways. What I tell them is, okay, look, I don't see gay as an identity. I see gay as a description. It is a description, and Ish in the comments just in the comments, Ish was talking about the Kinsey scale, like 1 being completely stone cold heterosexual and 6 being like basic bitch garden variety gay. I'm a 6, maybe like a 5.8, right? I'm a 6. Like, in fact, I am so fucking gay that I'll be walking in downtown Asheville, which is like this super hippie town, and a woman will just walk by right in front of me, completely topless, tits out, and I won't even notice her. It just doesn't even register. and my friend will be like, oh my God, Stephen, you're so gay. And I'm like, what? What happened? And she was like, a woman with her tits out just walked right in front of you and you did not even see her. All right. But so I'm pretty fucking gay. However, I have had sexual encounters with women when I was in college. And I also, and so there's even fluidity there for me, a teeny bit, a tiny margin, like teeny bit. It's like being a straight, like a werewolf, like once every full moon, I can kind of somewhat comprehend attraction to women. I'm like, okay, I can get it. But the thing about descriptions is that they are always approximations. And I think it's really important for people to understand that. So I see gay as a description rather than as an identity. In the same way, I have bipolar. Bipolar, not to compare a mental illness to homosexuality, but just on a surface level, bipolar is a description of a certain pattern that a mind makes over time, and that's it. So gay is a description of an interior experience and the way that manifests in the world. That's it. And when I think people shift from identity to description, that can be very liberating for them. Mm. And every description is approximate at best. And the other thing about categories that I think is really important here is the human rights movements that are most effective, in my judgment, are the ones that focus on universal humanity. They are the ones that focus on broad categories versus small categories, right? And so if you look at the successes of the civil rights movement, if you look at the successes of the gay rights movement, of the women's movement, where they succeed, in my opinion, is when they emphasize, I am just as human as you. Please ascribe to me, give to me the innate dignity and rights that you enjoy because I am just as human as you. And the things that make us similar vastly outweigh the things that make us different. And I think that works. That is what succeeds, is universal humanity and appeals to what I call the two poles of human identity. And there are the two most important poles. On the one end, we're all human. And with that comes what some would call being made in the image of God. And that is universal. And that ascribes to us certain rights and certain inalienable rights that are given to us simply by merit of the fact that we're human. And then on the other end, we have the individual. And that is, so we have the largest identity and then we have the smallest identity, and the smallest is individual. And we are all first and foremost individuals with our own unique constitution and our own interests and our own inner worlds. And with that comes innate dignity as well. All right. So these are fundamentally Christian ideas, in my opinion, of the innate dignity of the human and the individual, and they're also fundamentally Enlightenment ideals. When we emphasize those, that we are individuals and humans first, that works as a foundation for a functional society and to fight against bigotry. That works. This is why Harvey Milk, the great gay activist in the 60s or in the 50s, he was working before Stonewall. He said everyone must come out. And the reason is because he knew that if every gay person came out of the closet, then everyone would know a hairdresser, a father, a mother, a son, a sibling, a cousin, an uncle, a grandparent who is gay. And that would unveil the universal humanity. These people are just as human as us. And it would reveal, oh, they're individuals. They're not the same. They're unique people. So that really works. Where I think my fellow beloved progressives really fuck up is when they focus on everything in the middle and elevate that above those two pillars. Because now the stuff in the middle is super important. gay, man, woman, nationality, skin color, ethnicity, language. All of that shit really matters. And you don't know me as a person if you don't know that middle stuff between human and individual. You don't know me as a person. So it's important. And it does mean that I have certain advantages and disadvantages in life. However, when we elevate that above above the individual and the human, that is when I think it triggers humanity's tribal in out disgust response. And so when we and I think that the progressive movement really makes this mistake all the time. Some would call it identitarianism, some would call it identity politics. I really kind of hate those phrases because those have become so politically charged. But I think we need to keep the focus on the human and the individual, and then all that stuff in the middle follows. And when we get that order reversed, that is when movements fail. That is when movements for equality fail, and it's also when horrors happen, when bigotry flares.
Yeah, I love. Oh, do you mind muting?
Oh, yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I love everything you were just saying there on that. I quite agree. I've long been quite tired of identitarianism, and it's, I mean, not just progressives are guilty of this, also the conservatives are, but identity politics and all that kind of stuff. And I agree, if we're going to make any argument that's going to be at all convincing to I guess the religious right, the traditionalists that exist within Christianity and other religious traditions, it's going to have to be something based on like the infinite dignity of the individual, of every individual human, because we can talk about all these theological arguments and that kind of stuff, and we can make comparisons and demonstrate the disparities between how gay people are treated within the church and other groups of people. For example, couples who can't have children biologically, like that's a very big kind of like disparity in terms of attitudes towards marriage and children, and those types of arguments against homosexuality and that kind of stuff. And so we could talk about that stuff, and I think that's important. But I think, like you said, appealing to our universal humanity is by far the most effective kind of like tactic, if you will. And it's the opposite. You were speaking earlier about dehumanization. It's this ability to humanize people and just sit down and speak to people and realize that they aren't so different to you, and actually you share so much in common, and that members of the LGBT community are just like normal humans that you interact with like all the time, and they're not the downfall of Western civilization, or whatever kind of narratives are pulled about this kind of stuff. But so I completely agree with you there, and maybe then to wrap up, do you have any advice for someone who is growing up in a religious family, Christian or otherwise, who have these sorts of attitudes towards homosexuality, but are realizing that they may not be, straight or cis or whatever else? They may not in some way fit into the expected boxes. Do you have any advice, kind of based on your own experience, about how one might navigate that in their own life, and kind of go about it? You're very quiet.
How about now?
You're still very quiet.
Weird. How about now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Just like send up a flare if there's audio issues. I'm doing this on my janky ancient phone. So there is an author who was a huge influence on me back in the day, and her name is Wendy Vanderval Gritter. And she started in the ex-gay world and then progressively moved in ex-gay ministry and then progressively moved to be affirming. She coined a term and wrote a book called generous spaciousness. And for me, generous spaciousness is the key. So generous spaciousness means giving oneself kind of an open enclosure mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that removes the pressures, that removes this horrible weight to figure this out right now. You have to figure this out right now. It removes that, and it's about giving oneself the space to be okay with the uncertainty and to be okay with where we are. Now, that is a Herculean task. That is so hard. And a really important thing to do is to find the people who can give that generous spaciousness to you. And in my situation, the most helpful people, and I had some extraordinary people in my life who helped me along the way, they didn't say, Stephen, you're gay, just accept it. Like, you're gay, just accept it. Nor did they say, Stephen, you are, I recognize that you're struggling with this, but this is not God's plan for humanity, and you just need to accept God's rule for your life. The most helpful people in my life did neither of those things. What they did was they held this generous spaciousness for me, this open space where I could be okay where I was and where not knowing right now was okay. This was really important when I first finally accepted that my orientation wasn't going to change, and I had no idea what that meant. Right? I had no idea if that meant I was going to become affirming, if I was going to have to commit to a life of celibacy. I had no idea. I was in my early 20s and late teens going through this. I mean, confronting a life of celibacy when you're like a young guy is really fucking sucks. And the most impactful people were the ones who said, I'm here with you, and you have the space and the time to figure this out, and I won't judge you, whichever path you take. Right? And you are more important to me as an individual than where you land theologically. That is more important to me. And so to me, when someone comes to me and they're really grappling with this, my response is to not impose where I am onto them. Right? And so if someone comes to me, they're Christian, they're struggling with their orientation, they don't know what they believe, my job in that position is to provide them generous spaciousness. And so I guess this advice is twofold. First, it's to people who are struggling in that. But it's to, seek out those people. You can find them online. You can find, and also you need to give yourself that generous spaciousness. And I know that is way more easily said than done. It's a Herculean fight to be able to do that. And this is also advice for people who want to help, right? And, I had therapists back in the day who were like, Stephen, just accept you're gay. That was not helpful for me, right? That wasn't what I needed, because I was so locked in the theology and so locked in the tradition. People really needed to meet me there. And so it requires, that's really hard for people to do. It's really hard for people to kind of set aside their own strongly held beliefs in order to meet someone where they are and to just walk with them. But that, I think, is what's needed. And then once people have that generous spaciousness, a lot can come together. A lot, but it just takes time. And that's the other thing about generous spaciousness. It takes time. And so that's what I'll say on that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's a nice place to end. So thank you very much, Stephen, for coming on and talking about all of these totally uncontroversial topics with me. It's been great. We might get cancelled, but whatever, that's fine. So do you want to just tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, totally. Also, I'm a veteran of many cancellations over the years, so come at me, bitch. People can find me at sacredtension.substack.com. My name is Stephen Bradford Long. You can follow me on Notes. Like I said, I don't really cover this topic as much anymore. I did write an article about. I did write some a few years ago that people might be interested in, and you can link those if you want. But yeah, so if you're interested in weird spirituality and mental health and masculinity subjects and sexuality as well, I write quite a bit about human sexuality. Give me a follow. And also to all of my listeners to all of my readers who are not yet familiar with Benjamin Curtis, please give him a follow. He writes super cool stuff.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's been awesome, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Thank you to everyone the live stream. And thank you to everyone who is watching subsequently. Please like and subscribe on both YouTube and Substack. But yeah, I'll sign off now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
If I can end the live, what the heck?